Hello students, in this video I'm going to walk you through assignment 3, analog to digital, and hopefully explain how and why I'm asking you to do some very specific things. From the class Blackboard, you can download the A3 sample deliverable.zipped file, and if you extract the contents, you will see a folder with these 4 files. You might see an extra garbage file in here. Just ignore it if you see it. But I would like you to open this Illustrator file, a3 sample deliverable.ai. And once you have this open, I'm using the space bar to bring up my pan tool there. Once this is open, I recommend having your links and your layers file open as well. Those are located underneath the window menu option. This is a good habit to get into, especially when someone else gives you an Illustrator file. It helps you know what is going on. And as you can see in this one, it's got 5 layers that are somewhat logically named. That helps you manage the file. It also helps you when you export it to other formats. And the links shows you the images that are linked inside of this document. Now, even though it has 300 cli.tif 3 times, it's only linked once. This is just showing you that it exists in 3 different locations on this map. The large one, this corner one, and the smaller color corner one. So that is what that means. You know what? While we're talking about links, let me show you something. You can hit this flyout button here and embed images. That makes it a part of the file. It makes your file larger. You're effectively doubling up your storage of this image because you're not deleting the original, you're just embedding it. So as your files grow and grow and grow, that can start to eat up hard drive space quickly. I'm going to do it anyway here to show you something else. I can see this little icon that tells me that it is embedded, but I can no longer edit original if I hit this flyout button here. It gets really tricky to unembed. Whereas this color one, if I hit the flyout, because that is not embedded, I can edit original. And now it is open in Photoshop. I can make changes. Those changes will be reflected when I return to Illustrator. So I'm going to undo a couple times with my keyboard just to remove that embed. And then I'll return to the layers panel to show you a couple things that are kind of nice. Also, I recommend when you do this project, don't recreate this whole thing from scratch. You can use this as a base, but I do want you to remove the parts I created. I don't want you to add to them. I want a very clean file from you. So we will need to clean up the file here. You will also need to clean up the folder structure here. I'll explain that right now. So this is just prepping the base for you to start your work. You could delete the entire layer by dragging it down to the trash icon here. I would not do that because we can still use that as a container. So what I'll do is select the contents of that layer by clicking this little circle here. Now I can hit delete. The contents are gone. The bitmap overlay layer only has 1 item. If you're sure there's only 1 item in that layer, you can select it in your workspace. So I have my select tool. I'll just click on it, hit delete. That also works. Selecting from the layer is especially useful for things like this. Notice my legend layer has a handful of these little numbered icons. I'll zoom in so you can see that a little bit better. And it has them down here as well. So it gets a little tricky. You have to be kind of surgical to select all of these. If I hold down Shift, I can do a multiple select as I click. But you might accidentally pick something in another layer that you don't want to delete. And that's what the colors are indicating here. I've got 2 separate layers, items from 2 separate layers selected. So let me click in gray space to deselect. Much easier just to click the little circle up here. That will select the contents of that layer. Then you can hit delete on your keyboard to get rid of those. So let me zoom out and reposition this. I'll try to explain which shortcuts I'm using as I'm using them. I tend to do them without thinking, but spacebar is your pan tool, and then you can just click and drag with your mouse. I happen to have a trackpad, so I can zoom very easily in and out with a trackpad. You maybe found out that you can't zoom like you do in Photoshop by scrolling. Scrolling moves it up and down, but if you hold down the Alt key as you zoom with your scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out. So I'm holding down the Alt key as I scroll. Just a little FYI there. Back to our map. It is now set up to be printed. So I could print this and start tracing or drawing on top of it the two types of drawings that I'd like you to digitize. Before I do that, back to this file structure cleanliness thing. I'm going to go back to that folder. Now, because I have my zipped package here, I can keep that, and if I mess this up, I can just extract the contents again. A zipped package is a really good archival format just to save, to transfer. It's one file as far as the computer is concerned. So I'll keep that there. But in this folder, I'm going to move a few of these items to the trash. Right click, move to trash. Right click, move to trash. Making sure to keep this one because I'm still using that one. So when I save, or when you save the images that you are digitizing, you will put them in this folder before you place them. You don't have to do that. It's not an absolute, but it's just a good practice that I recommend you get in the habit of doing. Also, I want to reiterate that when you package this up, I do not want extra files. I don't want my files and your files. I want a very clean folder structure. So this is set up. You would print this at scale at 11 by 17. You would lay out your tracing paper and trace and scan it back in. When you scan this, you don't absolutely need an 11 by 17 or large format scanner. Why is that? Well, if I draw a shape here, and I'm going to make this 8.5 by 11 inches, and you know what? I'm going to rotate that. You'll see that an 11 by 17 inch sheet of paper is plenty of space to trace on that lawn area that we'll be scanning. So just keep that in mind. You don't need to hunt down a large format scanner. Once you've got these scanned, or drawn first, I should say, then it'll look something like this. Just tracing paper, markers, crayons, whatever. You'll need to find a scanner. So here's where you are going to need to use your discretion and intuition, because all scanners, most scanners, have slightly different interfaces, but the common things you will always see is a mode, and under that mode there will always be, or most of the time, a black and white mode. It's pure black and pure white, which corresponds to this file format that I describe in the PDF here. There will be a grayscale, which is levels of gray, and there will be a color, which is of course color, and there may be multiple other colors, but don't worry about those right now. With the black and white, you can get by with a much higher DPI because there's less information per pixel that the file needs to store. You could safely go up to 1200 DPI. For this assignment, I want you to do 600 DPI, and I don't want you to scale it. You're scanning this at its drawing, so if you see any options on here to scale the drawing or to specify a specific size other than the actual size you are scanning, don't select it. So that is for the black and white setting. For the color, I want you to do color and 150. Don't get those backwards. It will really mess things up. Now, this particular scanner that I have plugged into my computer does not have a threshold option. You may or may not see it. It's important, but it's not a deal breaker if you don't see the threshold, especially if your drawing is primarily and very clearly one thing or another. This is very clearly a white area. This is very clearly a dark area. The threshold shouldn't matter, but if there's literally gray area, that threshold setting would tell the scanner what do you convert to white and what do you convert to black. And I've got a couple of other screenshots here just to share. Here's a screenshot from another scanner, and you can see the same images. This one calls it 24-bit color. And if you were to click this drop-down list, it might say black and white, it might say bitmap, it might say text mode. They call it different things. But this little icon here, if you ever see this histogram kind of shape, that is the threshold button. So you would click that to adjust the threshold. Here is another screenshot from a different scanner. Black and white, again, sometimes called text mode because it's a very efficient mode to scan text at a very high resolution. But here is that threshold control for this one. And finally, a third screen. This one I've got the three options that you can see: text mode, black and white, and color, and the other settings there as well. So I would go ahead and scan these. You would go ahead and scan these. Once they are scanned in, they will look something like these. And once you are in Photoshop, I recommend verifying that you scanned these correctly. You know what, I forgot to mention, notice on my scans I included a little tick mark when I created the trace here and here. That corresponds to something on the actual map that makes this easier to align. But to check that you did this correctly, in Photoshop, go to Image and Image Size. And here I can verify that my resolution is in fact 150, which is what I want for the color. And if I set my height and width to inches, I can see 8.5 by, well, a little over 11. That was just the size of the scanner bed. If this were to be 300 and half of that, it's still kind of the same file, but it's going to make it tricky to align this up. Here's my black and white drawing, image size. I can see that my resolution is 600 and my size is in fact the same, 8.5 by a little over 11. For the color mode, you can check that from image mode right here, bitmap. So here it's telling me the mode is bitmap. It's not telling me the file type is bitmap. This is in fact a TIFF. .tiff. TIFF format can embed bitmap. JPEG cannot. Can't stress this enough. You cannot save, do not save your black and white as a JPEG, because by the nature of the file type, it will convert it to a grayscale. So just don't. Use .tiff, use .bmp. The color one, you can be a little bit more flexible. Now, you might do this. I've seen this happen where someone gets the numbers swapped. This is scanned as a grayscale. I can verify that here. If I go to my image size, I can see that my resolution is 600, so that looks right. But if you zoom in, you can see there are actual levels of gray in each one of these pixels. For this assignment, I don't want you to do that. This is not white. It looks white, but if you were to zoom in, you would see that it's actually a bunch of grays and odd grays as well. So there may or may not be a situation where you need to scan that. I am looking for a very crisp black or white. And if I zoom in even more here, you might say, well, that's not very crisp. Look at that. It's kind of rough and grainy, but that is about 1/16 of an inch. Your eye is never going to pick that up. It just makes the file size much more efficient and flexible for a number of reasons. If you do this, go back and rescan it, because you could fix it here, using the word fix very loosely, by doing this, image, mode, bitmap. Oh, there we go, problem solved, right? No, because now Photoshop needs to look at every single pixel and decide, is this pixel black or is this pixel white? And if I go ahead and hit OK, well, from here it looks all right. But if you zoom in, you'll see the problem pretty quickly. And this file size it's inefficient, it'll print like crap, and it just does not work. So keep that in mind. You cannot correct the error, at least for this assignment, in Photoshop. I'll go ahead and close that. And here's the one I opened up earlier. Also, while in Photoshop, a good idea to save these to that folder location where we just previously removed some items. I'll call this one my color. I could copy these manually, but I'll just do it this way since I've got them open. Save as. Sometimes your scanning application will open it directly in an image editing application. Again, don't choose JPEG if you ever see that as an option for your bitmap, because it will convert it by default to a black and white. So TIFF is good, or I could do bitmap, BMP. Now these files exist structurally in the right spot. All I need to do is position them in Illustrator, save this, and compress it, upload it, assignment will be done. Let me go through that really quickly. Here is my Illustrator document. You can get this into your Illustrator document two ways. You can drag and drop from your computer. So I'll just take this color scan, drag it, and drop it. That's fairly self-explanatory. Or from within Illustrator, you can go File and Place, and then navigate to that location. Now I've got to go to my downloads. That is where this one is at. And hit place. There we go. I'm going to do that one more time, just because there's something you may accidentally do. When you place it, you have the option to resize it. When you drag and drop it, it just automatically put it in at its right size. So when you see this interface, if you just click and release, it will position it at the scale it was digitized. If I click and drag like this, I'm dragging and release, it positions it at the size you just specified. It gets a little bit trickier to do that because now I need to go in here and play with it to get it to the correct scale. But the reason I'm having you do this as specific as I am asking is it will allow you to not have to worry about that, because I know I scanned this at the correct scale. If I just place it, all I need to do is rotate this and position this. Now, I wasn't really paying attention. I accidentally put these in the legend layer. Here is how you fix that. It can be a little tricky. I can highlight and go to Edit, Cut, then highlight the layer I want that to go into, Edit and Paste. That gets really tricky if you have a bunch of things that you need to copy. Here's a much easier way. Highlight the item in your workspace. So I've clicked on that color drawing and drag this little color icon that indicates the selected art. So I can just drag that down to color overlay. Now that is in the correct layer. And all is right with the world, except for a few more things, which is sorting these out or rotating and placing them. A couple other tips that I'd highly recommend. There's still some extra information in here, and I'm going to pan down so we can see this whole thing. We don't need all of this extra white space. It's kind of inefficient. Honestly, I shouldn't have even scanned that part because it's just wasted file space. But if you get this far, this isn't terrible. You can mask it. I'll highlight this image and I'll click the mask tool. Once I've clicked that, I can drag these images in, or the image bounds rather, just to get rid of most of that stuff that I don't need. And when it looks good, I can just click in this off of the artboard and that is set. There's another way to do that. Let me move this one over here. I can draw a shape on top of it. So maybe I don't want those trees, those existing trees. So it's a little tricky to get with a square or a rectangle, so I'm going to delete that. I'll use my pen tool and I'll just outline it this way. Now also, if you notice all of this snapping going on, that's called a smart guide. If you don't want that on, you can do a Control U or a Command U on a Mac. And I shouldn't have done that right in the middle of drawing that shape because it kicked me out of it. So I'm going to delete those. Control U, Command U, that turns on and off the smart guides. So now I've got it turned off. Notice it's not snapping all over the place. This color doesn't matter because all I'm doing here is I'm just setting up a mask. I've got this shape. I will select those, and where does the clipping mask live? It's under Object, Clipping Mask, Make. Or I could do Command 7. I would guess on Windows it is Control 7. So now that creates a very nice vector mask. I don't have all that other stuff to bother me. How do we position these? Well, you know what? Before we position these, I'm going to change the layer type to make this a little bit easier to see through. In Photoshop, the layers have the layer type right on the layer panel. So I'm back in Photoshop. This is in a background, so let me make it not a background. And here's my layer appearance type right on that panel. Darken, multiply, screen, etc. I've talked about multiply and screen are probably the two most popular that you will ever use. Back in Illustrator, not as easy to find. It actually lives under the appearance window. So you need to bring that up, window, appearance. It will look something like this. And here I can change the opacity of my selected item. I could just change the opacity. That's not really what I want to do. I want to make this multiply in how it is rendered. So now anything that is white becomes transparent. And you can play around with the other ones, kind of get some different effects. The black and white one, you don't need to do anything. If it's not already transparent, you did something wrong. So back up, try it again. All right, so this looks pretty good. Now all I need to do is rotate it. There's some really good rotation built into the select tool. Here's a couple things not to do. Do not squish it. You shouldn't have to if you've done everything correctly. So let me undo that. If you hold down Shift, that will retain or constrain that to its proportions, but I'm going to undo that because I also don't want to resize this. If you have to, you can do it if you absolutely have to, but keep in mind it means you did something wrong along the process here. But what I wanted to show you is if you just hover your cursor towards the corners, the icon changes to kind of this roundish double-headed arrow. And that will allow you to rotate about center. So you can do this to get this into position. And this one is pretty easy, so you could probably eye it. You know, and notice I'm keeping an eye on these corner tick marks I created. So you know what? That one's probably not bad. When you get in close enough, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to finesse it into position. So that looks pretty good. I'll call that one done. Unless you accidentally grab it and move it like I just did, so let's undo that. Okay, the black and white one, how do we get this? I will show you this a slightly different way using the actual rotate tool because there's something really helpful that I'll show you here. All I'm going to do is get, and you know what? I accidentally got rid of that tick mark, so I need to edit this mask. I'm looking for that corner tick mark up here. I'm glad I did that because now I can show you how to edit a mask. If you double click on this mask, I should be able to, oh, I guess I can't. Oh, I can move it independent of the mask. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to hit escape and do an undo. Because what I need to do is double click on the actual, okay, never mind, I guess I can't. What I'm trying to do is move this little handle here. Undo. Oh, there we go. Success. I knew there was a way to do it. So let me back up, explain what I did. Sorry I had to have you watch me trudge through that. But if you want to edit a mask, you've got your select tool and you've also got your direct selection tool, which is a more precise tool. You can select parts of a selection. Well, this selection includes the mask that you can see by this kind of angular shape that I created earlier. If I grab the direct select tool, and I'll back up from square one, nothing is selected. I'll highlight this selection, then grab the direct select tool, then click once, click and release. That is telling me now that that handle is selected on my mask. Now I can move that, and I'm effectively unmasking a part by redrawing the mask shape. When you are done, just click in gray space. My whole point of doing that was to get this little guy right here back, because now I can position that so it's touching the same corner. That corner is in common, even though it's horribly rotated wrong. Here's why you'd want to use the rotate tool. This is cool. If you click it and then just start dragging, it'll rotate, but undo. You don't want to do that, because right after you click the rotate tool, click again in your model, and that will set the anchor point. See that little blue icon? So it's a little tricky. Rewind, watch it again if it doesn't look just like this. Now if I click out here, I can click and drag and rotate and get it specifically where I want it to be. Whoops, and I accidentally set my new rotation point. You don't want to do that. Reset my rotation point, click and drag. There we go. What happens if you double click on that? Well, it's kind of neat. It brings up this tool here. And just like before, can I move my rotation tool? I can't. Let me cancel out of there, because I'll show you something else. Before we move away from this rotation, you've probably already got this into position. Rotate tool, if you hold down Alt and click, it does two things. It sets your rotation anchor and also brings up this manual dialog, where if you prefer to rotate it this way, if you've got something selected, my bad, I've got the shape selected, rotate tool, Alt, click to set my point. Now I can manually do it this way. And if you prefer to do that, you sure can. So this, for the most part, is looking pretty good for what I want for this assignment. The one thing we're missing is the legend. I want you to go in here and do some more do some more Illustrator stuff. Show me that you know how to use Illustrator. In the original, I had just numbered a few things, and that's pretty easy to do. I'm going to show you one other little recommendation, not a requirement, but it does not hurt. So I'm going to draw a shape, and I'm going to give it maybe, a blue icon, blue color. And then I'll put, some text in here. You don't need to edit the shape. Let me back out, because that was a little bit more information than what you needed. Text, I'll just type 1, and I'll scale that text up and maybe make it bold. Why not? This is up to you. Don't copy my exact style here. This is just showing you an example, and maybe I want to make that white. There we go. Now I will select this with the select tool and make a copy. How do I make a copy? I could go Control C, Control V. I could go up here and copy it. I don't want to do that. I'm going to drag it while holding down the Alt key. Holding the Alt key, click and drag. I can make a copy. That's neat. Okay, I'm holding down Alt. I am clicking. I am dragging. I'm also now going to hold down Shift. So I'm doing lots of stuff, and you will be too if you are following along. Shift constrains it in an orthogonal direction, whether it's 90 or 45 or straight up and down. And when you drag this to the side, you can let go of everything, and it has successfully made you a copy. You could do that again as many times as you want. Before you do anything else, you can do Control D or Command D on a Mac, and it will make a duplicate in that same direction. Now I'll just come in here and edit these. 2, 3, double click, 4, 5. These are very large, but that's okay, because I will make them smaller by selecting and dragging while holding Shift. So there's another thing I'd like you to do. You don't have to do this, not a requirement, but a good habit is I'm going to turn these into symbols. So Window, symbols. Why am I doing that? Watch this. If I drag that first one up to my symbols, and you don't have to worry about the name, probably doesn't hurt to call it something logical. That now becomes something that I can change later on. Maybe the client doesn't like blue. Well, if I've got these sprinkled all over my map, I can just edit the symbol, or I can edit it directly in the map that I'll show you here in a moment. Whoops. Whoops. That's why you don't want to make it too small, because it gets hard to select and drag. Select and drag. So now all of these are symbols. I can even delete them out of my map because I don't really need them anymore for now. But if I wanted to label these, so maybe I want to label my bench area, and I want to label this berm, and I want to label this planter, and maybe this gathering space, and maybe this open space. So those, again, they're in my legend layer. If you accidentally put those in another layer, how do you move them? Well, you can click this little box here and drag them, drag that little color circle. But I put mine in the right spot because I was being careful of what I was doing. So also, I would probably want to put a legend down here. So what I'm going to do is drag those again. Here's a situation where you might want to turn on the smart guides. That is Command U or Control U. Now watch what happens as I drag this in. I can snap it or align it to these other shapes. But there's lots of things on here that it's snapping to, so I want to show you a different way to organize these. You know what? When in doubt, you can just eye it. Just get them close. I like things that make sense when things are aligned. These aren't distributed very well, but once you roughly get these into position, here's a quick way to fix that. Use the Align tool. So Window, Align. That brings up this dialog. You may need to click on the flyout and do Show Options. That will give you a couple more things. I don't know why that's not always on. It's not a whole lot of extra space. But down here, you can select Align To. This is really important because you can align to your artboard. If you have that selected, everything is relative to whatever artboard. In this case, it's an 11 by 17 inch artboard. Or just to the selection. I'll explain key object in a moment. I want to align to selection, and it's also distribute to selection. I'll grab my select tool, and if I click, hold down shift to allow me to do a multiple select, maybe not. Oh, that's because I was holding caps lock. Hold down shift allows you to do a multiple select. Now I can click distribute vertical, and it does just that. It makes them a nice vertical distribution. Now I want this to align to the bottom of this one here. They're really close. Which one is lower? I don't quite know. I could check, but you know what? Just to be safe, I'm going to move this up higher because I want to make sure I align to the bottom of 3. This is a style thing. This is just how I did it. You don't have to align 3 to 5. I'm just using this as an example. Select 5, hold down shift, select 3, click this one, align bottom. Now those are aligned on the bottom. Now let's do this. Maybe 4 and 2 are really close. I can't quite tell. I mean, I can kind of tell, but I can't quite tell which one is lower. And 4 is actually lower. So if I were to do that same step, it kind of messes up my nice distribution over here. So I better undo that. Here's where you want to use key object. So I will select 2, hold down shift, select 4. I'm not clicking or holding anything. Before I do anything else, I can click on 2, and you can see it gets a border around it. That is telling you that is now the key object. And by default, the align to is set to align to key object. So now if I click align bottom, you would think, maybe without knowing key objects, that it would align to the lowest of the items. I'll click it. It actually moved 4 up because it aligns to the bottom of your key object. Now 4 and 5, I'll select that, click on that. I will align those left. Oh, now everything is all feng shui and aligned. Holding down shift, now I can move these, I can scale them up, and it looks pretty good. Now I just need to add some text, and you can do that same text tool. Sometimes I do this. I'll just say, just placeholder text. I'll get one, I'll scale it up, holding down shift as I scale to constrain. You can also mess up your constrain when you scale. So I tend to always just hold down shift by habit. Now I'm holding down the alt key, clicking, holding down shift as well to keep that. I'll do a command D to do a duplicate. Click, click, hold down alt, hold down shift, and whoops, I went too fast. Hold down alt, hold down shift, and now those are all fairly. I could clean those up some more with the align tool, but for the sake of time, I'll just keep it like it is. Now I need to clean up my windows. Sometimes your windows do this. They get a little carried away. This is a situation where you want to either reset your workspace from here, reset essentials, or from your application frame, you should be able to see which workspace you are in, and I can reset essentials. Ah, nice and clean. So let me edit this text. Number 1, seating. Number 2, oh, berm. This is not going to be very informative, but you get the idea. And number 5 is open space to go throw a football. All right, that looks pretty good. Maybe you get all of this done and you find out your client really hates the color blue. That's okay because you were smart how you created this. You can bring up your symbols library and double click on that symbol. That will open it up here. Now I can zoom in, highlight this shape, change the color to, oh, I don't know, how about orangey yellow? And I can either click on this little arrow in my upper left that will exit the editing mode, or I can just click in white space. It'll zoom me out. Doesn't really matter where you're editing that. It's a little deceptive, but it actually changes it here. Let me click over in white space again because I somehow lost most of my drawing. Well, that's not good. Let's figure out what happened here. Oh, it was just a zoom rendering bug. So I zoomed in and zoomed out. It all came back. Notice that is now changed, and it changed here, and it would change wherever else I would have that. You can see the benefits of that if you had a bunch of tree shapes. You would need to do that for each one. Now, if I was really being smart, I would have created the background as one symbol and the numbers as another. You can also edit these by double clicking right in your model. Don't worry about the size change. Just know that you are editing a symbol and make the same color. Or maybe you want each one of these to be a slightly different color just to help with the visual association. So there you go. Once this is done, which this is pretty close, there's maybe some cleanup, you would save this, or even do a save as, save it to that same folder. You can give it the same name, or you know what, I'll call this final. Sometimes I'll call projects WIP, work in progress, and when I'm done, I'll change the name to final. In this situation, we are doing an Illustrator, not a PDF like we did with the previous assignment. Save. Once again, don't select create PDF compatible file. Make sure that is deselected. Make sure include linked files is deselected for this assignment. Down the road, you can keep those if you want, but I want you to keep this file very lightweight, and I'll save this down to a CS6. Hit OK. Go down to my downloads folder. And now I've got an extra folder in here, extra file rather. Again, I don't want you to include anything extra here. So before you submit this, take a look at this and ask yourself, is there anything extra in here that Matt does not want? If there is, get rid of it. Just move it out. So this one, I'll right click, move to trash. You can delete it however you want. Then on Windows, you want to right click over your folder and select Send to Compressed Folder. On the Mac, it's a little bit different. It's right click, compress. Either way, it creates a file here. This name doesn't really matter. You can type your name, but that is the file I want you to upload to Blackboard, and all is right with the world, and we can move on to the next assignment. So good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.